Alright, so let's figure out how we're going to divide fractions. We're going to start off kind of simple and kind of work our way to more complex problems. But if I have 2/3 divided by 2/3, this is fairly straightforward. Anytime I have a number divided by itself, even if it's a fraction, it's going to equal 1. And if I had a picture of that, I would have 2/3. And I would say, how many times is 2/3 going to be able to go into 2/3? Well, it can go in 1 full time. So 2/3 divided by 2/3 is going to equal 1. Pretty straightforward. What if I had this situation? 2/3 divided by 1/3. You might be thinking to yourself, well, that one's pretty straightforward too. It's got to go in. Here's 2/3, and then it's going to be able to go in there. 1/3 is going to be able to go into 2/3 two different times because they have the same denominator. So it's almost like just saying 2 divided by 1. And so that equals 2. Pretty straightforward. So what about this though? 4/5 divided by 3/5. Well, in these first ones, since I had the same denominator, I just looked at my numerators and then I divided. So 4/5 divided by 3/5 would end up being 4 divided by 3. And I can change that because I had the same denominator, so I just said 4 divided by 3. And I could change that to an improper or a mixed number and say 1 and 1/3 if I wanted to. That means 3/5 goes into 4/5 one time, but then it has 1/3 left over. Now that one's not as straightforward, but if you're just looking at the numerators, you can kind of see that. And then we get something down here where we have different denominators. With fractions, we could make them go into the same denominator and then say, let's turn these into denominators of tenths, because that's a common denominator. So 4/5 is the same thing as 8/10, and then 1/2 is the same thing as 5/10, and then I'm dividing these two, and I would say 8 divided by 5, which gives me 8 divided by 5, which gives me 8/5, and then I would turn that into a mixed number, 1, and I have 3 left over, 1 and 3/5, like that. So that's an option that I have as well. Now, there is actually I think, a quicker way than finding a common denominator. So let's see what we can do. First few, we found a common denominator and then we just divided our numerators. But here's going to be a different way that you're going to see more traditionally taught a little bit. It's going to be a little bit quicker than finding a common denominator sometimes. So to divide fractions a bit more quickly, we must find the reciprocal of the divisor. The divisor was that second number when it's written left to right. So you might be wondering, well, what's a reciprocal? I think the easiest way for me to explain what a reciprocal is just to show you. So if I have 2/3 and I'm trying to find the reciprocal of 2/3, the reciprocal of 2/3 is just flipping the numerator and the denominator. It's 3/2. What about if I have the fraction 1/2? The reciprocal of 1/2, if I flip my numerator and my denominator, is 2/1. I can even just write that as 2. What if I have the fraction 5/8? 5/8. The reciprocal of 5/8, if I flip my numerator and my denominator, is going to be 8/5. And I'm going to leave that in improper form. And what about if I have a fraction like, or what if I just have a whole number like 4? And I have to find the reciprocal of 4, and it's not a fraction. Well, 4, let's think of 4 as 4/1. Okay? The reciprocal of 4 is going to be 1/4. And maybe just a couple more for good measure. Let me do, if you have space underneath, write it underneath there. 12/5. That's an improper fraction, but that's okay. The reciprocal of 12/5 is going to be 5/12. Okay? So you need to be able to find the reciprocal. Let's do one more whole number just in case. Reciprocal of 8. Well, let's think of 8. It's a whole number. Let's think of it as 8/1. The reciprocal of 8 is going to be 1/8. Okay? This is sometimes called the multiplicative inverse, but we'll just call it the reciprocal. So, with that knowledge, let's take a look at some of these fractions. If I'm going to divide, I need to be able to find the reciprocal of the divisor. So I'm going to rewrite this. My reciprocal of my divisor here is going to be 3 over 1, because reciprocal. I'm going to find it. But instead of dividing, I'm going to now multiply by the reciprocal of my divisor. Now 2/3 divided by 1/3, that was one of the ones that we did in the beginning. We said, oh, that's 2 because 1/3 goes into 2/3 2 times. Let's see if this whole reciprocal thing actually works and matches up with what we said. 2/3 times the reciprocal of 1/3. Instead of dividing, we're going to change the operation. We get 2 times 3 gives me 6. 3 times 1 gives me 3. 6 divided by 3, this is improper fraction. That gives me 2. That matches what we said earlier. So this method does work. Okay, let's try this one. 5/12 divided by 2/5. Well, I'm going to turn this into multiplication, and I'm going to say 5/12 instead of divided by 2/5, I'm going to multiply by the reciprocal times 5 over 2. So 5 times 5 gives me 25. 12 times 2 gives me 24. I can leave this as an improper fraction, or I can say 1 and 1/24. I had to multiply by the reciprocal. Let's try this next one. Make this a little bit easier on myself. I'm going to go ahead and simplify before I even do my division. So 6 ninths, I can simplify that into 2/3, but divide both sides by 3. 2/3 divided by 3/4. Now, what I'm going to do, find the reciprocal again. Let's do the reciprocal. And 2/3, let's keep that number the same. 2/3, our dividend, times the reciprocal 4/3. Let's do this blue. 4/3. That's going to give me 2 times 4 gives me 8. And 3 times 3 gives me 9. 8/9. You could have done it without simplifying. You just would have had a bigger fraction that would have simplified down to 8/9. Alright, so let's take a look at 3/4 divided by 2 1/2. Well, I'm going to keep my 3/4, so let's say 3/4. I'm going to keep that, and I'm going to convert this first into an improper fraction. So I have 2 times 2 is 4, plus 1 is 5, and that 5 over 2. Okay, now I'm going to just treat this like my other ones. This is going to equal my dividend, 3/4, times the reciprocal of my divisor, times 2/5. Okay, 3 times 2 is 6, 5 times 4 is 20, and I can simplify that. I know 2 goes into both of them, so 6 divided by 2 gives me 3, 20 divided by 2 gives me 10, so 3/4 divided by 2 1/2 gives me 3/10. So to divide fractions, you can just find a common denominator and divide your numerators, or a more quicker way is to probably just go ahead and find the reciprocal of your divisor and then turn it into a multiplication problem. And as we saw up here, it'll equal what we intuitively can see on some of these examples. Alright, so let me know if you have any questions about this. It can be a little confusing, so go ahead and reach out if you're unsure.